We talk all the time about how kids need to see themselves in the adults around them. And in the end, I became a teacher so that I could be that person for kids like me. You can imagine then how seriously I take it when I'm presented with the opportunity to do just that. I want to tell you about Ash. Ash is a dynamic, creative, and kind kid. They love reading, and though they might not have been the strongest student in my English class, they were the kid you want in your classroom. That kid who's just motivated and seems to really enjoy learning. Over the course of our year together, we got to know each other pretty well. We would share book recommendations, and Ash would tell me all about different things that were going on in the community for LGBTQ people. I was in awe of Ash's ability to be so open with me about the things that made them different. Of course, what I failed to realize was that there was a whole world outside of English class that Ash experienced every day. And the following year, I received an email from Ash's parents asking if I would sit down with their child. Apparently, at that point, I was the one that Ash felt most comfortable talking to. Now, selfishly in that moment, I felt a little proud, because this is exactly what I wanted to be for my students. We were going to sit down, it was going to be my Oprah moment, and we were both going to leave that conversation feeling like we were in the audience that day she gave everybody a car. When we sat down to talk, Ash described feeling alone and upset all the time at school. And when I asked why that was, the thing is, Ash couldn't point to one big thing. Instead, they described a series of small instances in which they were sent negative messages from, yes, their classmates, but more importantly, their teachers. Things like using the wrong pronouns or the wrong name, or not correcting students when they used the wrong pronoun or the wrong name. Things like telling Ash to let it go when something happened in the cafeteria because being gender neutral or transgender was new and people just didn't get it yet. Things like telling Ash to just come out because won't that be easier for everyone? As Ash was talking, all I could think about was something that a professor said to me in college once. It is impossible for students to learn from someone who they feel does not respect them. How could we expect Ash to sit in our classrooms every day and focus on learning when all they could think about was the fact that their teachers didn't care about who they were as a person? And I want to be clear here, the key is not whether or not Ash's teachers truly did or did not care, or the fact that some of them were kind and compassionate people. Ash's perception was that they didn't care and that they weren't kind, and therefore that was their reality. I wanted to help Ash, and I wanted to try to repair their relationship with their teachers, but I knew I needed to do it carefully, because at the end of the day, I couldn't fully relate to their experiences. I explained to Ash that part of what comes with being an LGBTQ person is an understanding that sometimes people simply might not know the right thing to say or the right thing to do. I encouraged Ash to do what I do in these situations, which is to explain to the person what they have done wrong and educate them on what is correct. I reminded Ash that there is great power in giving somebody a second chance to make things right. I regret giving Ash that advice. The thing is that ignorance is not an excuse when you are an educator, and it should not be up to a 13-year-old to teach the adults in their life what is right and wrong. We need to be proactive, and we need to take time to learn about people who are different from us. And this doesn't just apply to topics like gender identity, but to everything in our society that either awards people privileges or takes them away. Race, income, education, sexuality, being able-bodied, that list goes on and on. And it's especially crucial to do this when there is a lack of diversity in your staff. I once had a colleague come up to me and say that she really, really hoped that I got a kid in my class the following year because she suspected he might be gay. While I take a lot of pride in being visible, it cannot be up to me, the gay guy, to be the resource for every gay or potentially gay student in the school, because they might not end up in my classroom. Instead, it is the entire staff of a school that needs to be able to help every student. And I think that's possible because most teachers are going into education to have a positive impact on kids. So we need to be explicitly thoughtful about the messages that we're sending to students, and we need to take time to listen, really listen, to stories from people who are different from us, so we may better understand them. And at the end of the day, I think that's an easy thing to do, because teaching at its core will always be a human endeavor first. Content is important, but we hold immense power in our classrooms, the power to change lives. It is not wrong to treat the students in your classroom like they're people, because they are. Unfortunately, those small instances became too much for Ash, and they left the school. Of course, I'm not privy to all of the reasoning behind the decision, but it's my understanding that a major part of it was that they simply felt they would never be respected. I think about that situation all the time, especially when I think about school climates today. When we think about bullying, for example, we're not just seeing the physical altercation anymore. Instead, it's the small instances, it's the microaggressions that have become the enemy of a safe school. When they happen to you, they stick in your mind, and they become like this Rolodex or this card catalog of negative memories to file through. Or old references, a contact list on your iPhone. You get my point. So what if we could take those small instances and turn them into positive ones for students? What if we could show them that empathy, listening, understanding, and acceptance never go out of style? They're like the tailored blazers of good values. They look good on everyone, and if you take care of them, they last forever. We know that kids in part emulate the behaviors of the adults around them, so if we model our good value blazers, won't they want to wear them too? Of course, none of that is what I was thinking about when I knocked on the counselor's office on the second day of my teaching career. I had convinced myself that it was time to pack up my classroom and call my mother to let her know that, unfortunately, I'd be moving back in with her after she finally got rid of me. I spent that entire afternoon trying to figure out what I could have possibly done, and nothing came to mind. So I walked to the counselor's office, and I knocked on the door, and I sat in the chair, and I braced myself. And she said, "We need to talk about Nat." And it clicked. I knew exactly what this was going to be about. You see, like most teachers on the first day of school, I give a survey to my students to get to know them better. I ask them the usual questions. What do you want to do better in English class this year? How comfortable are you raising your hand and talking in class? I ask them some fun questions like, what's your ideal superpower? What's your favorite word? But the last question stays the same every year, and that's, is there anything else you feel I need to know about you? Nat's survey was like everyone else until that last question, where they explained to me that they are gender neutral. I really respected their willingness to share that with me on the very first day, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't misidentify them in class. So in the morning of that second day of school, at the end of class, I called Nat back to my desk, and I said the following. I have a question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm just hoping you'll share with me what pronouns you prefer. Nat said that they and them would do just fine, and that was the extent of our conversation, which is why I didn't think much about it and why it didn't come to mind when I was trying to figure out whose life I destroyed 2 days into teaching. I was just doing for Nat what I hoped someone would do for me if I shared that information. The counselor explained to me that none of Nat's teachers had ever done that before, and Nat was so excited that they went to the counselor to tell them about it. And this is what it looked like when I realized that I was being praised and not fired. Look, did hearing that make me feel good? I would be lying if I said it didn't. I told you I like attention. This was some pretty positive attention. But teaching isn't about getting praise for simply being a good person. That conversation in the counselor's office should never have to happen. It should be the norm that students don't have to fear the small instances. It should be the norm that students feel safe and respected in their schools. And it should be the norm that teachers are careful about the messages they send to students and that they work to create positive small instances, because they're the ones that can really change everything. We talked for a little while longer, and the counselor was super cool about what must have just been like tons of relief radiating from my body. And in the end, she passed along one final message from Nat to me. Can you just let him know how excited I am for class this year?